They say you can spend your whole life beside someone and still not truly know them. I never believed that cliché until 6 weeks ago. My name is Martin Grayson. I'm 49 years old, a senior engineer at a respected tech firm in Hartford, Connecticut. I live in a quiet suburb, in a home I helped build, brick by brick, over the span of nearly 3 decades. I'm the father of 2 bright, accomplished daughters, Elena and Marissa, both attending the University of Connecticut. By every visible measure, I've lived a successful, stable life. But none of that prepared me for what I was about to uncover. For 25 years, I was married to a woman I thought I understood. Nora. She's 48, a charismatic real estate agent with a voice that can close a deal and a smile that makes people trust her. When we met, I was drawn to her poise, her quiet strength. She was never the most affectionate person, but I chalked that up to personality differences. I respected her boundaries and never pushed for more. I thought that was what love was: patience, acceptance, quiet loyalty. But that illusion shattered on a Tuesday night, just after 11 p.m. The bedroom was dimly lit, the soft yellow glow of her reading lamp casting long shadows against the wall. Nora was curled up in her usual position, back to me, one arm tucked under her pillow. I had been staring at the ceiling for nearly an hour, thoughts spinning. My mind kept circling back to something that had been bothering me for weeks, something I couldn't ignore anymore. "Nora," I said quietly, trying not to sound accusatory. "Can I ask you something?" She mumbled a drowsy her voice already halfway in dreamland. I took a breath. Why the sudden change in the bedroom? Her body tensed. She didn't turn around. The silence that followed wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that vibrated with unsaid things. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice low but alert now. "For over 2 decades, you said you didn't like certain things. You said they made you uncomfortable. But now, all of a sudden, you've not only changed your mind, you've initiated them. Twice. In 1 week." She didn't respond. I continued, forcing my voice to remain calm. "I'm not complaining, Nora. That's not what this is. I'm just trying to understand why." "Why now?" She sat up abruptly, clutching the bedsheet to her chest like armor. "If you don't like it," she snapped, "we can go back to how things were." That stung. It wasn't what I'd expected. I thought we'd have an honest conversation. Instead, she deflected. Defensive. Evasive. "That's not what I'm saying," I said, sitting up. "It's just, you're suddenly more adventurous than some of my ex-girlfriends in college." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, I see. That's what this is. An interrogation." She flung the covers off and stormed toward the door. "I'm sleeping in the guest room," she hissed. I watched her reach for the knob. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I kept my tone steady. "It's fine," I said. "I'll know everything in the morning anyway." She froze. Her hand hovered midair. Slowly, she turned her head. "What did you just say?" I looked her dead in the back. "The private investigator I hired. I get his full report tomorrow morning." Her body stiffened like she'd been struck. Then she slammed the door behind her. I waited. 30 seconds later, she came back, banging on the door, sobbing, pleading, asking me to let her explain. But I didn't move. Not out of hatred, not out of cruelty, but because, for the first time in our marriage, I needed clarity more than I needed her comfort. I needed to know who this woman beside me really was. I lay there, unmoving, as her cries faded into silence. My tears came slowly, first a trickle, then steady streams that soaked into my pillow. But beneath the pain, something else began to burn. A righteous anger, a storm forming in the distance. By morning, I would have answers. And I knew, even then, that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. The digital clock on my nightstand flickered from 2:46 to 2:47 a.m. when I finally swung my legs off the bed and stood up, feeling like the floor beneath me was made of water. My body moved, but my mind was stuck in a loop, replaying her laughter, the smirk she gave when I first asked about the change, the sudden distance, the way she turned the questions into a fight. Every gesture that used to feel familiar now seemed calculated. I moved like a machine, methodical, cold. I didn't leave a note. I didn't pack a suitcase. Just a gym bag I'd quietly prepared a week earlier when my gut told me something wasn't right. I grabbed it from the back of the closet, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out the front door without looking back. The neighborhood was still, silent. Streetlights hummed faintly as I slid behind the wheel of my car. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need distraction. Pain had a voice of its own, and it was screaming in my head louder than any music could. I drove to 24-Hour Fitness, a place I usually visited out of routine. That morning, I needed it like I needed air. I pounded my fists into the treadmill, pushed weights until my muscles begged for mercy. I wanted the soreness. I wanted to feel something, anything, besides this hollow rage devouring me from the inside. In the locker room, I stood under the shower for a long time, letting the boiling water sear into my shoulders. I couldn't tell where the sweat ended and the tears began. I didn't even try to sort them out. I just let them fall. I changed into the fresh clothes I'd hung in my car days ago, a clean button-down, slacks, polished shoes. The armor of a man still trying to look composed while crumbling inside. By 6:15, I was sitting in a corner booth at Lucy's Diner, 3 blocks from my office. The same waitress who'd been there for the last 15 years walked over with her usual half-smile. "Coffee, hon." "Please," I said. "And keep it coming." My voice sounded foreign, flat, like it belonged to someone else. She nodded and walked away. I stared at the steam curling off the surface of my coffee, not drinking it, just watching. My phone buzzed beside me. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Nora. The screen read 37 missed calls, 22 unread messages, all since midnight. I turned the phone face down. She'd made her choices. This was mine. I sent a message to Angela Ford, my deputy at work, my closest confidant these last few years. We'd bonded over late projects and shared frustrations, and I trusted her more than anyone outside my family. "Need to talk before office hours." "Lucy's. Important." She replied within seconds. "Be there in 15. True to her word, she arrived 14 minutes later. A trench coat over a charcoal suit, dark circles under her eyes. She took one look at me and froze halfway to the booth. "Jesus, Martin," she whispered. "You look like you've been hit by a train." I didn't respond immediately. I waited until she slid into the seat across from me before I started talking. I gave her the condensed version, Nora's sudden behavior change, the confrontation, the private investigator, the deadline I was now counting down to with dread and fury. "So you don't actually have confirmation yet?" she asked, stirring cream into her coffee. "No. I'm meeting him at 8. "But you already know," she said, more a statement than a question. I nodded. Angela leaned back, hands wrapped around her mug. "You know how I found out my ex was cheating?" I shook my head. "My doctor told me," she said flatly. "I caught an STD from him. When I confronted him, he tried to flip it, said I must have cheated first. Classic narcissistic projection. He only admitted it after I showed him the lab results." I winced. "I'm sorry." She waved it off. "Best thing that ever happened to me, in the long run. Truth is ugly, but it's freeing." Her voice dropped a notch. "If Nora's been unfaithful, the worst part isn't the physical act. It's the lies. The daily eye contact while hiding something so big behind her smile. The betrayal of trust, not just the body." I clenched my jaw, feeling something sharp and cold settle deeper inside me. She was right. It wasn't just about the sex. It was about the erosion of respect, the slow death of honesty, the performance of partnership while building a separate life in the shadows. "You shouldn't go home tonight," Angela said, breaking the silence. "Stay at my family's place, our lake house near Cooper Lake. It's empty until Memorial Day. I'll text you the code." "I'll think about it," I said, though in my mind, I already knew. I wasn't going back home unless it was to pack. This wasn't going to end in retreat. It would end in exposure. I paid the bill, thanked her, and stepped outside. The early April sky was just beginning to brighten, casting a surreal beauty across the parking lot, mocking, almost, in its serenity. I slid into my car and entered the PI's address into the GPS. As I pulled onto the road, a single thought looped in my mind like a heartbeat turned into thunder. If this is the game Nora's chosen to play, I'll be the one to end it. I pulled into a quiet side street just off downtown Hartford, my fingers tapping the steering wheel, a slow, anxious rhythm echoing the beat of my heart. The PI's office was in a nondescript beige building tucked between a dentist's practice and a tax consultant. No flashing sign, no nameplate on the door. Just a number, #312, and the weight of my world about to change behind it. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step heavier than the last. My shoes made soft thuds on the worn-out carpet. When I reached the door, it was already ajar. A gravelly voice called out, "Come in." Detective Carl Briggs sat behind a battered oak desk, its surface cluttered with files, a black and white monitor, and 2 empty coffee mugs. He looked exactly how I'd imagined him. Ex-cop energy, salt and pepper buzz cut, eyes like weathered stone. No smile, no small talk. "It's all there," he said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the desk. I stared at it, frozen. The edges of the folder were worn from handling. On top, a red sticker that read, "Confidential." My hand hovered above it, then dropped. "How bad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Briggs leaned back in his chair. 6 weeks' worth. Photos, transcripts, call logs. You name it. I don't sugarcoat, Mr. Grayson. You hired me to find out the truth, and that's what I did. I opened the envelope slowly, my hands shaking despite the calm I was trying so hard to maintain. The first photo was innocent enough. Nora walking into a house with a for sale sign in the yard. It was part of her job. But the second photo twisted the knife deeper. She was laughing, standing close to a man I didn't recognize. Tall, mid-40s, lean, perfect teeth, wearing a designer watch. The label on the back of the photo identified him, Trevor Dalton, a colleague at Connecticut Premier Properties. Married, no children. My breath caught in my throat. By the 5th photo, they were kissing in the driveway of another vacant house. Briggs broke the silence. They use homes she's listing. Smart cover. Nobody questions it. They meet 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Occasionally at his house in West Hartford. His wife's a pharmaceutical rep, gone during the week. I flipped through more pictures, each one chipping away what little doubt remained. There they were, again and again, touching, laughing, kissing, sometimes inside her car. Once, she was sitting on his lap in a model home's kitchen, her head thrown back in laughter. Audio too, Briggs said. We planted a recorder in her car. Legal in Connecticut. You should listen, but I'll warn you, it's not easy. I skimmed the transcripts. Each line felt like a punch to the gut. Nora, he has no clue. Too trusting. Trevor, ever think about telling him? Nora, and ruin this? God, no. Then came the one that broke me. Nora, maybe you can be my physical education teacher now. She giggled after that. The sound of her giggling, on paper, felt like acid on my skin. I closed the folder and sat there, staring at the wall behind Briggs. I didn't feel sadness anymore, just numbness. Cold, like my soul had been scooped out and left on the concrete outside. Briggs didn't speak. He didn't need to. He'd seen this look 100 times before. I'm sorry, he said finally. I really am. You deserve better than this. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I walked out of that office, the envelope pressed against my chest. The sun was fully up. The world had the audacity to keep moving. People crossed streets, checked phones, laughed into coffee cups. And I was walking through the ruins of my life, invisible to all of them. I got into my car and tossed the envelope onto the passenger seat. It landed with a dull thud, heavier than its weight should have allowed. I sat there for a long time, not starting the engine, just breathing, or trying to. The woman I'd loved for 25 years was not the woman in those photos. The woman I'd married would never have smiled like that for another man, would never have risked our home, our children, for some empty affair. And yet, she had. Had she always been this person? Or had I just refused to see her changing all along? I didn't know which truth hurt more. Eventually, I started the car and pulled into traffic, headed toward the University of Connecticut. I needed to see Elena and Marissa. They were the only real thing left. The only pieces of my life untouched by Nora's lies. The road blurred as I drove, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. Nora had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. The drive to the University of Connecticut was a blur. I barely registered the trees lining the freeway, the early spring sun spilling golden light over everything as if the world hadn't just collapsed around me. It felt cruel. How normal the day looked, how quiet the world remained while mine had been reduced to fragments inside a manila envelope. Elena and Marissa, my daughters, the only constants in my life. I had to see them. I didn't want to break their hearts, but I couldn't lie to them, not like their mother had lied to me. They deserved the truth, and I needed to anchor myself to something real. They were my anchor. I parked near the student center and sent a text to both. Need to see you. Urgent. Elena replied almost immediately. On my way from lab. 10 minutes. Marissa followed shortly after. Just finishing study group. Be there soon. 15 minutes later, I saw Elena first. She jogged toward me, safety goggles still pushed up on her head from her electrical engineering lab. Her pace slowed as she saw my face. "Dad?" she said, eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" Before I could answer, Marissa arrived, her arms full of textbooks, her face softening when she saw us. "Is everything okay?" she asked, looking from me to her sister, and then back to me. I didn't answer right away. I led them inside and found an empty table in a quiet corner. They sat across from me, concern etched across both their faces. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I tried again. Still nothing. Then the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent, unrelenting streams that blurred my vision and soaked into my collar. I hadn't cried in front of anyone since they were little. Seeing their alarmed faces nearly broke me again. Elena reached out first, gripping my hand tightly. Marissa followed, sliding closer and wrapping her arms around my shoulder. We sat like that for several minutes. Three people tangled in a moment too heavy for words. Finally, I found the strength to speak. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to fall apart." "Dad," Marissa said, her voice trembling, "you're scaring us." "What happened?" I looked into their eyes, these two brilliant souls I had helped raise. I had no idea how to soften what I was about to say. There was no way to protect them from the truth. "Your mother," I said slowly, "is having an affair with a man from her office. His name is Trevor Dalton." Marissa gasped. Elena's face didn't change at first, just froze, her features hardening. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice flat. In response, I reached into my bag and pulled out a single photo, the mildest one I could find. Nora and Trevor, standing close together by a sold sign, his hand resting on her waist as they kissed. I placed it face up on the table between us. Elena stared at it silently. Marissa began to cry. "I have everything," I said quietly. "Photos, recordings, text messages. But I won't show you any more than this. You shouldn't have to see it." "I wish I hadn't." "You don't need to," Elena said firmly. "I believe you." Marissa sniffled, dabbing her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. "Are you going to divorce her?" The question hit me like a hammer. I felt something shift inside me, finality, certainty. I looked at both of them and nodded. "I don't see any other way. I still love your mother, or at least the woman I thought she was. But I can't stay married to someone who looks me in the eye and lies." Just then, Marissa's phone buzzed. She looked down and inhaled sharply. "It's her," she said. "She's calling." Before she could react, Elena reached across the table and snatched the phone. She pressed the answer button and put it to her ear. "If you need someone to talk to," she said, voice icy, "call Trevor." And then she hung up. "Don't hate her," I said gently, reaching for their hands again. "No matter what she's done, she's still your mother. But don't let her turn you into a silent accomplice, either. Respect her as a parent, but recognize the truth. She made her choices." Elena nodded, her grip tightening until it hurt. "What happens now?" I sat back, letting out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The weight pressing down on me had shifted, lighter now, but still there. "Now," I said, my voice steady, "we start over." We talked a while longer, about practical things, about legal steps, about where I'd stay and how we'd handle the holidays. But beneath all of it was a quiet, mutual understanding that something sacred had broken. As I left them with promises to call, I watched them walk away together, shoulder to shoulder, stronger than I had ever hoped. And for the first time in days, I felt something other than rage or sorrow. I felt pride. I didn't sleep that night either. After leaving the girls, I drove around for hours, nowhere in particular, just trying to outrun the weight crushing my chest. But there was no escape. Every traffic light, every familiar street, every glance in the rearview mirror reminded me of a life that was no longer mine. A life that had been carefully dismantled, piece by piece, behind my back. By sunrise, I was parked outside the house I'd grown up in. My parents' home. A modest two-story colonial tucked into a quiet suburb of Hartford. The porch swing still creaked in the breeze. The dogwood tree out front was blooming, just like it had every April for the last 30 years. I hadn't planned to go there, but something pulled me in. I needed the grounding, the familiarity, the one place that had never lied to me. My mother, Elaine, opened the door before I could knock. "Derek," she said softly, eyes scanning my face. "What's wrong, honey?" I stepped inside. His dad home. In his study. The smell of coffee and old books hit me like a warm blanket. I turned the corner and saw him. Raymond Langford, retired high school principal, crossword puzzle half filled on his lap, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He looked up, saw my face, and without a word, set the paper aside. Shannon's been cheating on me, I said, my voice hollow. For months. Maybe longer. Behind me, my mother gasped. My father didn't flinch, but something in his eyes shifted, darkened. I hired a private investigator. I have proof. My mother sat down slowly across from me. Oh, Derek, are you sure? Maybe she was manipulated or pressured. You never know with these types of men. No, I interrupted gently but firmly. She wasn't coerced. She was willing. Enthusiastic. She laughed about it with him. Bragged about how trusting I was. I could barely say the words. What hurts most isn't even the betrayal, I continued. It's realizing she doesn't see me as worthy of basic respect anymore. My father nodded slowly. If respect is gone, he said quietly, everything else is just performance. And that was it. One simple sentence that confirmed everything I had been feeling. 25 years of my life, my loyalty, my sacrifices, my love, reduced to an illusion. A play performed for the neighbors, for the girls, for appearances. I stayed a while longer, just sitting with them. I didn't cry this time. I was past tears. Then my phone rang. Dolores Bennett, Shannon's mother. I showed the screen to my parents. She's probably heard a version of the story already. I answered. Derek, she said without greeting, her voice sharp and commanding. You need to come over. Immediately. Of course. Shannon had run to them. Spun her version. Probably painted me as irrational, paranoid, cruel. I'll be there in 30, I said, then hung up. The Bennetts lived in West Hartford, in a sprawling Tudor home nestled behind iron gates. Her father, Howard, had made his fortune in commercial real estate. Ironically, the same field Shannon had entered, initially through his connections. I'd never felt like I belonged in their world, despite my own success. They never said it aloud, but it was there, in the subtle jabs, the condescending smiles, the way they always made me feel less. Dolores opened the door with a scowl carved deep into her face. Howard stood a few paces behind her, arms crossed like a judge awaiting testimony. Before I even sat down, Dolores began. What exactly are you accusing our daughter of? It's not an accusation, I replied calmly, placing a redacted version of the PI's report on the coffee table. It's proof. Howard stepped forward and picked it up. Dolores paced behind him like a storm cloud ready to burst. So because of one mistake, she snapped, you're going to destroy this entire family? 25 years of marriage, just thrown away. Something inside me snapped. You're wrong, I said sharply. This wasn't one mistake. It was a series of choices. Repeated. Systematic. Hidden. And she didn't do it alone. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out another folder. What's this? Howard asked. Text messages. Between Shannon and her best friend, Lisa Whitman. Dolores blinked. Lisa. She encouraged it, I said, handing over the pages. Called Trevor a gift. Said Shannon would never forget what real size felt like. Dolores's hand trembled as she read over her husband's shoulder. Howard's jaw tightened. Neither spoke for several long seconds. I didn't come here to ask your permission, I said, rising to my feet. I came to inform you. Out of respect. But I'm divorcing your daughter. And if Lisa ever contacts me again, I'll make every one of those messages public. To her husband, her church, her employer. Dolores opened her mouth to speak, but Howard raised a hand to silence her. At the door, I turned back one last time. I loved Shannon. I really did. But I refused to live in a home where I'm invisible, where my trust is a joke and my loyalty is used as a weapon. I walked out into the spring evening air, my heart pounding. It was the first clean breath I'd taken in months. I didn't go straight to the lake house that evening. Not yet. There was still one more thread to pull, one final piece to complete the ugly puzzle that had taken over my life. And I couldn't rest, not really, until I looked into the eyes of the only other person whose life had been ripped apart by this the way mine had. Trevor Dalton's wife. Her name was Monica Ellison. I'd read her name a dozen times in the PI's reports, along with notes about her routine. Every Saturday morning, she brought their 2 young boys to Willowbrook Park, where she sat with a group of mothers while the kids played nearby. According to Briggs, she was fiercely private. protective, and completely unaware of what was happening behind her back. I knew I could have mailed the evidence, could have left it to her lawyers, but it didn't sit right. She deserved to hear it from someone who knew the depth of the betrayal, not just the facts, but the weight they carried. I went home first, showered, changed, khakis, a light blue button-down, neutral, non-threatening. I didn't want this to feel like a confrontation. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wanted the truth to reach her in a way that wasn't cruel, but clear. Willowbrook Park was alive with weekend energy. Little League games echoed from the far diamonds. Children squealed from swings and slides. The smell of grilled hot dogs lingered in the breeze. It almost made me sick, how normal the world was. I spotted the group of mothers near the playground, chatting in a semicircle of folding chairs. Monica was exactly as Briggs had described. Petite, auburn hair cut into a practical bob, a subtle weariness around her eyes that said she had carried too much for too long. She was focused on her sons, scanning the jungle gym with the intensity of a mother who'd learned not to trust the world too easily. I approached slowly. As I neared, one of the other women, a taller one, with sharp features and a defensive posture, stepped between us. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone making it clear that she meant anything but help. "I need to speak with Monica," I said calmly. "Privately, just for a moment." "I don't think so." But before she could continue, Monica stood. "It's fine, Janelle," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I know who he is." She looked me in the eye, not with fear, not with anger, but with a strange, resigned understanding. "You're Shannon's husband," she said. "I am," I replied. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Janelle still looked skeptical, but she stepped aside. Monica led me to a weathered picnic table under a maple tree, far enough from the others for privacy. She sat down across from me and folded her hands, her shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. I didn't waste time. "I have evidence," I said, "about Shannon and Trevor. I won't go into detail unless you ask, but I needed to know, has this happened before?" Monica let out a short, bitter laugh. "Third time I know of." I blinked. After our second son was born, something changed in him. He became obsessed with control, with training women, like he was some kind of expert. I was his first student. I hadn't expected that level of honesty, but it didn't feel performative. It felt like the words had been sitting on her chest for too long. "I tried to forgive him," she said. "We went to counseling. Twice. But this time, it's different. With your wife, he's not even hiding it. He brought her into our house while I was visiting my mother." I swallowed hard, fighting back the image. "I brought something for you." I reached into my jacket and slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Copies of the PI's evidence. Use it however you need. Don't look unless you absolutely have to." Her hands shook slightly as she accepted it. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of children playing filtering in from the distance. Then, she looked up. "I need a favor. I want to go home and pack a few things before I take the boys to my parents. But Trevor might be there. Would you come with me?" I hesitated only briefly. "Of course." We walked back to the parking lot together. Her SUV led the way, my car trailing behind. Her house was in a quiet cul-de-sac lined with cherry trees. Out front was a shiny black pickup truck, clearly not hers. Parked across the street was another truck. An older man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, military posture. Monica nodded toward him. My father, Warren. Standing by the front gate was another figure, thick build, arms crossed. "That's Marcus, my cousin, just in case." Trevor was in the front yard, mowing the lawn shirtless like he didn't have a care in the world. As we pulled up, he shut the mower off and started toward us, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. "You've been following me?" he shouted at me. "You hired someone to spy on me." "I hired someone to watch my wife," I replied evenly. "You were just the bonus feature." His face flushed with rage. "She came after me, man. I didn't force her." "Thanks," I said, stepping out of the car. That just made my decision easier. He lunged, but Marcus stepped forward, shoving him back hard. Trevor stumbled, falling to the grass in a tangle of arms and curses. "This is over," Marcus said flatly. Warren crossed the street and stood like a sentry behind Monica as she stepped onto the porch. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You should go now. We'll handle the rest." I nodded and turned to leave. As I reached my car, Warren stopped me. "You're a decent man," he said, offering his hand. You're not alone in this. Monica could use someone who understands. I shook his hand, feeling something unfamiliar bloom inside me, a strange sense of kinship with these strangers, a quiet strength in shared survival. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Monica walked into the house, Marcus behind her. Warren remained outside, standing tall beneath the setting sun. Another marriage in ruins. Another life reassembled from pieces, just like mine. The lake house Angela lent me sat on the edge of Cooper Lake, nestled among whispering pines and framed by a rickety dock that stretched out over still, glassy water. It was the kind of place where time seemed to pause, where the world didn't demand answers. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe without bracing for another blow. I stayed there for 6 days. 6 days of silence, of reflection, of letting everything I had built collapse so I could start again with whatever was left. I spent mornings on the porch with black coffee and a journal I didn't write in. Afternoons walking the shoreline with thoughts louder than birdsong. And every night, I sat by the water, watching the moon ripple across the surface like a memory too painful to hold. It was on the 7th day that the call came. Dolores. Derek, she said, her voice different now, quieter, no longer commanding. You promised you'd talk to her once. I had. Against my better judgment, I had told her I'd give Shannon one conversation, one final chance to speak her truth. I need a few more days, I said. She'll wait. 3 days later, I sent the message. Come to the lake house. Saturday. Noon. We'll talk. Thank you, she replied. Just 2 words. But I could feel the weight behind them. That Saturday, the wind was calm and the sky clear. I set the patio table overlooking the lake. 2 plates, a platter of simple sandwiches, sliced fruit, 2 glasses. I opened a cold beer for myself and uncorked a bottle of Pinot Grigio for her. The setting was deliberate, neutral, civil, final. She arrived exactly at noon. Punctual. Always punctual. She stepped out of her car in jeans and a pale blue blouse, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked older, tired, but still beautiful, still the woman I had once built a life around. And yet, all I could see now was the distance, the damage, the quiet storm she had dragged into our home. Nice place, she said, trying for a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. We sat across from each other at the table. Neither of us touched the food. The lake shimmered behind her, wind rustling the leaves above. The silence between us stretched, brittle and tight. 25 years of shared memories collapsed into a few awkward minutes of nothing. Finally, she spoke. I'm terrified, Derek, she whispered, her voice cracking. Terrified of losing everything. I did something so incredibly stupid. I didn't speak, just took a long sip of my beer and waited. It started as curiosity, she continued. I just wanted to feel, wanted again. Like I mattered. Like I did when we were younger. At first, it was a stupid flirtation. But then it spiraled, and I kept telling myself I'd stop. That it didn't mean anything. But then, I didn't want to stop. She twisted her wedding ring absent-mindedly. I kept thinking I could still fix it, that we'd be okay. That you'd never know. But you did. I stared at her. Not with anger. Not with hate. But with the empty detachment of a man who had already grieved the living. I can forgive you, I said finally. Not for your sake. But for Elena and Marissa. For myself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I refuse to carry the hatred forward. Tears spilled from her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, nodding. I'll do anything, Derek. Therapy. Counseling. Full transparency. I'll cut him off. Just don't give up on us. I shook my head slowly. There is no us anymore. Her face crumbled. We're going to divorce, I said, my voice calm. The lawyers have the paperwork ready. From now until it's finalized, we speak through them. After that, if it's about the girls or something urgent, you can call. Otherwise, I want no contact. And us? She whispered, her voice barely audible. There is no us, I repeated. There's you, and there's me. 2 people who once shared a life. She looked down, broken. I never stopped loving you, she said through her tears. I just forgot how to show it. I know. That was all I could offer. One last sliver of compassion before walking away for good. We sat in silence again, but it was different now. Less tense. More peaceful. The lake rippled in the afternoon breeze, birds chirping in the distance. For a brief second, it almost felt like we were 2 old friends saying goodbye. Then she stood. I'm sorry, she said. I nodded. She walked to her car, pausing just once before getting in. Then she drove away, leaving nothing but tire tracks in the gravel and a faint echo of everything we'd lost. I sat there for a long time, long after the wine had gone warm and the fruit had wilted in the sun. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt free. 7 months later, the divorce was finalized. It came through on a rainy Tuesday morning, a quiet notification on my phone from my lawyer. Just like that, a 25-year chapter of my life was closed. Not with a bang, not with a final scream or grand declaration, but with a court seal and a line of legal text confirming what I already knew deep in my bones. It was over. I bought the lake house, the one place that had held me together when everything else was falling apart. It became my permanent home, my sanctuary. A place where the air felt clean, where memories didn't cling to the walls like ghosts, and where my reflection in the mirror didn't look like a man pretending to be okay. Life didn't return to normal. It became something new, something quieter, steadier. Elena graduated with honors from her engineering program and accepted a job with a defense contractor in Seattle. She called me every Sunday evening without fail, never missing a week. Her voice was my compass, steady and sharp, full of fire and purpose. Marissa got accepted into Johns Hopkins Medical School. She moved to Baltimore with her fiancé, a quiet, gentle pre-med student named Anthony, who looked at her the way I once looked at her mother. I could see the adoration in his eyes, the way his hand lingered on her shoulder, the softness in how he said her name. It gave me hope, even if my own love story had ended in ruin. As for Shannon, she started dating again. Her mother, Dolores, who had surprisingly become a softer presence in the aftermath, told me about him. He's an accountant, she said during one of our brief check-ins about the girls. Seems kind, gentle, steady. Good, I said, and I meant it. I held no hatred for Shannon anymore. Disappointment, yes. Regret, but not hatred. That would have been too heavy to carry, and I had no intention of letting her shadow darken the rest of my life. Lori Whitman, the so-called best friend who had cheered Shannon on like it was a game, didn't fare as well. After the messages I sent to her husband, her school board, and her church leadership surfaced, the dominoes fell fast. She and her husband moved out of state. No lawsuit ever came. Every word I shared was the truth. Just screenshots. No commentary. The evidence spoke for itself. As for Trevor Dalton, the man who treated my marriage like a playground, he was called into HR within weeks of Monica receiving the evidence. He resigned quietly. Monica got full custody, sold the house, and moved back to Michigan with her parents. Every once in a while, I'd think of her, hoping the boys were healing, hoping she'd found some piece of peace the way I had. 2 years passed. At a graduation party for the son of a mutual friend, I ran into someone unexpected. Janelle Ellison, Monica's cousin, the tall, defensive woman from the park. Derek Langford, she said with a half-smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You're still standing. Barely, I replied, but still standing. We talked like two veterans from the same battlefield. She'd gone through her own divorce shortly after Monica's. Another case of infidelity. Another man who thought secrecy and selfishness were signs of strength. But Janelle didn't carry bitterness in her voice, only clarity. Wisdom. A kind of hardened kindness that only pain can forge. That summer, she stopped by my office one afternoon. No warning. Just a knock at the door, the quiet squeak of it closing behind her. And then she sat on the couch like it was the most natural thing in the world. Just stopping by, she said, smiling faintly. We didn't speak about the past. We didn't need to. There was something unspoken between us, an understanding that neither of us was rushing toward anything, but we weren't running away either. I wasn't the same man I was 5 years ago. I was more guarded now, more deliberate. I didn't believe in fairy tales anymore, but I did believe in truth. In second chances, not at love, necessarily, but at living a life that felt honest. This story doesn't end with grand romance or redemption. It ends with something better. Peace. Self-respect. The quiet, unshakable strength that comes when you survive something meant to break you and refuse to let it define you. I sit now on the back porch of the lake house, the sun setting across the water, casting everything in gold. The breeze is light. The loons are calling. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's nothing left to fall. Just me. Whole. Honest. Free. If there's one thing this storm taught me, it's that the foundation of any relationship, any life worth building, is respect. Love can fade, attraction can shift, but without honesty and mutual regard, everything else is a facade. For 25 years, I believed consistency and sacrifice were enough. I worked hard, stayed faithful, put my family first. But I also ignored signs, avoided uncomfortable truths, and convinced myself that silence was strength. It wasn't. To anyone listening, especially those in the later chapters of life, know this. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity. Never too late to draw boundaries, to demand truth, and to start over. We deserve relationships where we're seen, valued, and treated as equals, not tolerated out of routine or convenience. Don't confuse longevity with loyalty. A long marriage isn't always a good one. If something feels wrong, listen to your gut. Ask the hard questions. Speak up. And if betrayal finds you, don't drown in bitterness. Mourn it, face it, and then walk through it with your head held high. Healing isn't loud, it's patient. And peace isn't found in holding on. It's found in knowing when to let go.